Hello and good morning to this quick tutorial on beginning visualizations with Pandas and Matplotlib. So if you're in class with me, welcome. Hopefully we can provide some additional tips and tricks that will help you out in class. And if you happen to fumble across my channel just looking for some help with Python or data analytics, business analytics, or just making visualizations for whatever project you're working on, welcome. I hope that I can help you out. If you have any other questions, feel free to shoot me a note in the comments of the video, and I'm happy to try to help out if I can. I just like doing this stuff because I'm a big old data nerd. So let's go ahead and jump right in. So here's where we're at. We have opened up a blank Google Colab notebook. And what we're going to need to do first is we're going to read in a really popular data set. It's going to be the Toyota data set, which is all over Kaggle. It's all over the place. It's in a lot of textbooks. It's just a really common data set of interesting information that we can use on Toyota manufacturing and sales for all kinds of predictive models and descriptive visualizations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off by importing a couple libraries. So we only need two libraries for today. So what we need is we need Pandas. And we need a new library, which most people probably know, but if you're new to class with me, you've not seen it before, we're going to import the library Matplotlib. And the two of these things together are what we are going to use to create some beautiful visualizations to kind of understand and explore our data a little bit. So we're going to go ahead and import those libraries. So the next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to read in the Toyota data set into our notebook. So what we're going to do is we're going to call that just DF for data frame, and we're going to read CSV. And an easy little trick, because we're working with Google Colab and I've already connected it to my Google Drive, so I can just jump right over to my list of files. I can grab my Toyota data set, copy the path, paste it in, and if I want to see it, it should show me the head and the tail. Okay, perfect. So what I can figure out really quickly from looking at this is in this data set that I have, I've got 1,436 rows of data, 37 columns. As you know, if you've been following along with the videos in this series, when you read in a data frame, if you simply just type DF or the name of the data frame, it's going to give you the head and the tail of that data. So it's the first 5 and the last 5 rows of data. So that's what you're seeing here, right? So there's 1,436 total rows. This is the first 5. That's the last 5. So what we want to do is we want to start visualizing this data. And there's a couple reasons why you would create a data visualization when you're working in business analytics. Reason number one would be exploratory data analysis. You're new to the data. You don't exactly know what's happening, and you want to just get an understanding, a description of what's happening inside that data. And you can do that using visualizations. That's one reason. And the second reason is to tell the story of your data. So you're creating a report to give to somebody else. You want to very quickly explain something that's happening within that data, a phenomenon that's occurring. You can do that with a data visualization. And if you do it right, even if you have someone that doesn't have a background in data visualization or data analytics or business analytics, they can still follow, because we all have at least a base understanding of some kind of concepts in things like bar charts and column charts and pie charts, things like that. So I want to just jump right in and talk to you about how we're going to do this today. And there are several different libraries in Python that you could use to create visualizations. I'm just starting off with the most basic of the basic options, and there are some better ones out there. They can do a little bit cooler visualizations, give you a little bit more flexibility, but if you're just getting started, this will get you going to get your work done today. So let's just jump right in. So when you look at our data, here's what you're going to see. You're going to see going across the top that you've got the model of the car listed, and that model is a string, so it's words. And if we wanted to do something with any column that's got nominal data in it, right? So categorical data, aka words, we would have to do some things first on the back end in order to make that work. We do have quite a bit of continuous data, so price shows up as numerical data we can work with. We've got age as data that we can work with, manufacturing month, year, the number of kilometers on the car, the fuel type, etc. So the first thing we may want to do is just figure out some really basic things, right? So maybe we're interested in the general distribution of age across all of the cars in our data set. And one good way to look at just a distribution of age is we can look at that by using a histogram. So I figured we could start off by just creating a basic histogram looking at this age column to figure out the frequency of occurrence from within each one of those age ranges. And we're going to do that based on 5 bends. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my data frames. I'm going to go DF. Okay. Now within that data frame, there's a couple different ways that I can work here. Now in this particular example, I want to work specifically with the age column. And in the Toyota data set, the age column is called age_0804. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use these square brackets here, and I'm going to actually tell it I'm only looking at the age 0804 column inside my data set. So then from there are a couple different ways that we can create a plot. One is called the data frame method, and the other one is using an option called kind. I'm going to show you both of them. I tend to prefer using the data frame method, which they talk about quite a bit in the Pandas documentation, but they both work, and it's really whichever one works for you. So let's just jump through and look at what that's going to look like. So what I'm going to do is, after I've just simply referenced the age 0804 column inside my data frame, and notice that I put the name age 0804 inside quotation marks, I'm going to do .plot, if I can spell. Then I'm going to do .hist for histogram. Then within there, I have a couple options I can do, right? So inside this histogram, inside the parentheses here, I can do a couple things. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it the number of bends that I want. So I'll say bends equals 5, and think of bends like groupings. Okay. Now, if I wanted, I could do other things. I could add a title, and we could call that age, for example. And if we go for it, and we'll do PLT.show, let's just see what we get. There we go. So we've got a little bit of a breakdown of all of the ages within our data set. So a couple things that I did here that I want to point out before we get going is I went through and I told it the number of bends, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bends, right? That's the bars that you're seeing inside this histogram. So what that's going to do is it's going to group things together based on the number of bends. So it's going to group all of the ages together based on these number of bends. So now additionally, I added a title. So I simply put inside this title equals age. And then afterwards, I've given it PLTShow. So let's talk about what that is. So if I took away PLTShow, this would still work. Okay. The only reason that you need to type PLTShow really is if you wanted to display 2 different charts inside the same cell. So if I wanted a second chart here, I would need to do PLTShow and then the name of the second chart. So for example, say I wanted to look at the frequency of kilometers. So I could do df dot km for kilometers. And then I can do .plot .histogram, so HIST, and we'll just give it 5 bends again. And we'll give it the title of kilometers. And that ought to be it. Okay. So we'll do PLT.show. When I do that, I should get, there you go, I get 2 different histograms that are showing up in there. Okay. So the only thing that PLTShow does is it gives you the ability to show more than one visualization inside a cell. Okay. So now we learned a few things when we did this. So let's kind of break these things down. So the first thing I did, because I was specifically isolating the age column or the kilometers column, I was able to directly reference that inside the square brackets, just like I would reference anything in a data frame. Okay. I used the plot method, and I said I wanted a histogram, so .plot.histogram, and then I simply gave it some parameters. So I said, hey, there's 5 bends, and we want to give it the title age. Okay. So that's your basics. So now the good news about plotting when you're working in Pandas and Matplotlib is that if you've done one of them, you've kind of done all of them for the most part. There are some nuances there, but within reason, you could very quickly go through different types of charts by simply changing the chart that you're referencing, right? So where I've got histogram here, I could reference something different, bar or pi or, bar H, which would be a horizontal bar chart. You name it, you can pretty much do it. But the best way to get into it is to show you some examples. So some of the things that you could see that might cause you some grief while you're going through and trying to create visualizations is when you do things like working with, say, nominal data. So when I say nominal data, it's categorical data. So for example, let's look at fuel type. Okay, so fuel type, there's a couple different fuel types in here. There's diesel and petrol, and I don't know, there might be electric or something of that, but we'll figure it out in just a minute. So because these are words, this is a string, and that's kind of tricky when you go through and work with that. So if I wanted to simply just know how many cars in the data set were diesel versus petrol versus whatever the other one is, I've got a couple options I could do. So what I can do is just numerically, if I wanted to see that, I can go through and take my fuel type. And I can go dot value counts. And if I do that, it's going to just simply tell me, all right, we've got 17. Unfortunately, I don't know what CNG stands for. Let's just go with maybe CNG is electric. I'm sure you guys will correct me if that's not right, but we'll just say that we've got 1,264 that are petrol, 155 that are diesel, and 17 that are something, CNG, whatever that may be. So now say we wanted to actually visualize this. We can visualize this now that we've gone through and counted all of the values inside each one of those nominal categories. So all we have to do is keep building off the value count. So we can use the plot method after going in and doing value count. So I can go dot plot, and then I can say something like dot pi. And when I do this, it's going to show me a breakdown of cars that are petrol versus diesel versus whatever CNG is. And we can very quickly figure out, hey, most of the cars in this data set are petrol, or they're gas cars. They run on oil. Okay. Now, remember what I said, because you've seen one, you've sort of seen them all. So where I've got dot pi here, if I wanted a different kind of chart to look at nominal data, I could change it really quickly to say bar. And it gives me bar. If I wanted that column chart, so we call it a bar chart in Matplotlib. In the world of Excel, this would be a column chart, and a bar chart would go the other way. In the world of Matplotlib, if we wanted to have a bar chart that literally goes horizontally, we would change this to bar H. And bar H is going to give you that same thing. It's just going horizontally instead of vertically. Okay, so one more time. So bar and horizontal bar. Okay, no problem. Easy, easy peasy. Okay, so let's say we wanted to look at a few other things. Okay, so maybe we wanted to look at something more interesting, like the relationship of the age of the car to the price of the car. Okay, so that makes it more interesting. So we're looking at two columns instead of one column. Before, we were really just looking at one. So we're looking at the age of the car compared to the price of the car. Because ultimately, if you're familiar with the Toyota data set, we could do some regression things here and get some interesting predictive modeling going on. So let's try to look at that relationship. So as you know from your reading, a scatter plot is a really good way to look at how variables interact with each other. Your target variable and your predictor variables, for example. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a scatter plot. And to create this scatter plot, we're going to go df, and we're not going to reference a column because we're actually using two columns here. So what I'm going to say is I want to look at the data frame, and I want to use this plot method. Okay, and from there, I want to use the scatter plot option. And now I'm actually going to have to go in and define the X and the Y. So I'm going to go X equals, and I need to tell it that I want to look at the age of the car. Now I want to make sure I've got age right, so I need to scroll up and look. It's age underscore 0804. Okay, so age underscore 0804. So we want to look at age, and then we want our predictor value, or excuse me, we want our target value here to be price. Okay, so we are looking at the data frame, and look at that. There we have it. Okay, so based on what we're seeing here, we actually see somewhat of a linear relationship. And that's something that helps us with this visualization. What we're starting to see here is that as the car gets older, as the age of the car goes up, the price of the car is starting to go down. So that might be something we could work with a little bit here. So that's a different kind of chart that we were able to create, something special that we can do. Okay, so a couple other things that I'll show you before we get out of here, because this was just a short and sweet option here. If you were to read some of the documentation, sometimes you'll see that people will give the plot a variable name. You can absolutely do that. I just changed it right here. I end up with the same output. Okay, so if I didn't do that, if I didn't give it a variable name, it's still going to output. Depending on the way you want to do things, depending on the way you want to work, if you were to simply read the documentation that's on Pandas website, you will see it saying, hey, we'll give this a variable name, and then we'll tell it to do something. Okay, so easy enough. So with that, friends, I didn't want to give you too much because this is just a beginning video on basic data visualizations. And I do want to go back and resum a little bit of what we talked about. So let's just jump up and I'll quickly recap some of the things really quickly and we'll get you out of here. So the first thing that you have the ability to do if you're using Matplotlib along with Pandas after you've read in a data frame is you can visualize your data. When you visualize your data, there's about 8 different types of visualizations you can create by default if you're using Matplotlib with Pandas. If you're referencing one single column inside your data frame, right, like I did right here, I can simply say, hey, I want to look at this age column inside the data frame and then simply use the plot method to figure it out. If I want to have more than one visualization inside a cell, I have to use PLTShow after each chart, after each plot, in order to see each one of those. Okay. We looked at working with nominal data. So if you've got something like words that you wanted to count up, you need to use value counts first before you plot it. And then we looked at the basic scatter plot that shows you how to visualize the relationship between two variables. Okay. So with that, there's one other thing I wanted to show you, which might cause some confusion to you. And it's the other way that you can create a chart working within Pandas and Matplotlib. So what I like to use is the data frame method, and that's what I've been using this entire time. But there is indeed another way to do this, and I'm going to cheat and I'm going to copy this code that we typed earlier, and I'm just going to paste it down. And the other way to do that is using this option called kind. So what kind will do for me is if I take this away, right? So after I've got plot, instead of putting in another dot and typing the kind of chart that I want, I can actually just go directly into plot and enter in kind. And then we can do bar, for example. And when we do that, it's going to tell me the exact same thing. So it's 2 ways to do the exact same thing. The only reason I point this out is that you can do one or the other, but you can't do both. So I can use this kind option here. So if I do plot kind, and that's going to go through and make this chart for me, this plot. Or I can use what they call the data frame method, which is highlighted on Pandas website. And when I do that, that's going to go through, and instead of having kind, I simply do dot, and it's like adding another method. So I'll do bar H, and it gives you that. So with that, friends, this was just a really basic introduction to some of the visualization you can do with Pandas and Matplotlib. There are some other libraries out there that give you a little bit more robust functionality, things like Seaborn, stuff like that. But for what we're doing in class right now, this ought to be enough to just get you started. And I'll give you a few tips if you're with me in class and you're working on homework. Remember that you can do other aggregation. There are other things you can do with things like group by, for example, along with value counts. So keep that in mind, get creative, and don't be afraid to group things together if need be in order to figure things out or to do a multi-column type of visualization. And with that, I will bid you guys adieu. I will talk to you soon. As those kids say out there, like and subscribe. Hopefully I'm able to help you out. I will have something a little bit more advanced for data visualization coming up, but this ought to get you going. All right, friends, have a great day.